the United States finds itself in a world of quite dramatic transition. As someone honored to have served as Secretary of State, I fully understand the sometimes agonizing difficulty of prioritizing U.S. interests and values in a geopolitical setting where the United States possesses immense but still limited power. Our speaker possesses a distinguished career in public service. He was confirmed by the Senate as Secretary of State in April of 2018. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure and privilege to introduce the Honorable Mike Pompeo, 70th Secretary of State of the United States of America. Mr. Secretary.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. It's always great to be where everything's bigger here in Texas. My team, as I was flying out this morning, reminded me that it is not its own country, so this is a domestic trip. I know you all may think differently. I get it. Thank you too, Jim, for that very generous introduction. I appreciate it. It's wonderful to be here at the Baker Institute. You were so kind. When I was nominated to be Secretary of State, I was CI Director. One of the very first phone calls I made was to Secretary Baker and said, hey, would you come? He flew out, spent a handful of hours with me out in Langley. And that time has certainly been much to my benefit, as I'm a better Secretary of State because of the wisdom that you imparted to me that day. You asked me to. You said, here's the deal. You got to come to the Baker Institute. And I'm now upholding my end of the quid pro quo, you know? Yeah. You got to have fun along the way. Look, the State Department's had a 26-year partnership with your Center for Energy Studies and many other fruitful ties, and we thank you for that. I want to thank you personally for that invitation to be here today. There are lots of great stories about Secretary Baker, and great stories about you too, Susan. A lovely couple that served America so graciously for so many years. When I was in Berlin, I had a chance to stop in a Stasi museum in what was former East Berlin. Several former prisoners were there to serve as guides to tell us the stories, the history of what had taken place in that particular space. It was unmitigated evil. Prisoners never knew what was coming. Indeed, the guards used to wear slippers, so the prisoners could not hear them coming down the hall. And yet the human spirit survived. One of those who survived, a man, told me that he was placed in total isolation, but that a few times a week the guards would let him outside, not completely, but in a cage. And they were told to look down, but he would glance up. And when he would glance up from time to time, he would hear some noise, and he would be told, look down, look down. But he saw and knew that there was a particular Pan Am flight that came by. He said it was his dream to get on one of those planes one day. What remarkable courage. And we should all be proud of what he did and what those seeking freedom did and what the world did and what America did to allow him to have that opportunity. Never underestimate the courage of that man or those who seek freedom. And never stop working for their triumph, wherever we can. America is a force for good. We are imperfect. We get it wrong from time to time. But wherever we go, I have leaders from all across the world who want to see the American Secretary of State. Not Mike, but the American Secretary of State, because they know that we will be a force for good in their country, in their region, in their part of the world, and that we will act for freedom and for what is good for the world. I hope God blesses this institute with its continued success, and may God bless our great country as well. And I look forward to taking a handful of questions about almost anything.
This next one comes from a student, the president of the Rice Young Democrats, a Maddie Scannell. And here it is. How is the administration's support for the annexation of the Golan Heights compatible with the administration's condemnation of Russia's annexation in the Ukraine?
Yeah, I mean, the fact patterns are manifestly different. We spoke to that very clearly when the decision was made. We were simply recognizing that reality on the ground and the history that existed in that particular space. There are many, many contested pieces of real estate around the world, and each one has its own manifestly different fact pattern. And what we have tried to do is say, hey, there's this set of international norms and understandings. There are fact patterns that lay against them, and where those norms line up, we should recognize those. We think that's most appropriate that the United States address those in a way that is consistent. And so those two fact patterns, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because it's complicated, but suffice it to say, as we evaluated each of those situations, we felt that they were manifestly different as a matter of international law, and we attempted to recognize that distinction.
Okay, thank you. This one comes from the president of the Rice College Republicans, and Anthony.
Oh, both alive and well on campus.
Yes.
I like that.
This comes from an Anthony Saliba. If the Chinese government were to use military force to subdue Hong Kong democracy protesters, would the United States government take steps to directly intervene?
Yeah. You never want to, that's a great question because I don't have to answer it. Anytime a question starts with F, if you can feel the free pass coming. It's the case that not only the United States, but the United Kingdom and now several dozen countries in the world have all made clear our expectation of how China will behave with respect to the people of Hong Kong. That expectation is based on the commitments that the Chinese government made. And so we've said repeatedly to General Secretary Xi, honor that commitment. You promised there would be one country, two systems. We've encouraged not only Beijing, but the protesters to engage in this political discourse for what the people of Hong Kong want in a way that is nonviolent, that can, with some hope, be resolved in a way that is peaceful, with few injuries and less violence. That is our expectation, and we've made that clear to everyone operating in that space. As for what would happen, I just never foreclose any possibility for how President Trump might think about how we should appropriately respond. Look, if you read the documentation, right, it's very clear that this is, again, to the first question about, or the second question about Crimea and the Golan. These situations are all highly factually dependent. You've got international law that overlays it. I'll just stop there.
I want to say what an honor it has been to have you here on behalf of Secretary Ms. Baker, the Baker Institute, and to thank you on behalf, I'm sure, of everyone for your serving the country with such great honor and distinction, and we wish you safe travels and safe always.
Ambassador,
so thank you very much.
Thank you all.